Well, the game of football has taught me so many things, man. Now, think about the huddle we have right now, right? I tell people this all the time. There's a reason why they call it a huddle. People have been huddling all their lives, trying to find ways to enhance each other's lives. The great teams do that all the time. The great teams do that. The better the huddle, the better the team. And so it's simple, man, how if you huddle for all the right reasons, we wouldn't have Ferguson. We wouldn't have some of the challenges that we have in our society. But as we all know, there's always a moment when somebody doesn't belong in the huddle. And yet we have to continue to move on. We got to continue to play. So the game of life, man, is always starting with the huddle. And for me, I'm lucky enough to know that, by the graces of God, man, it's been a nice huddle. It's been a nice huddle. And if I just keep making sure that he's in front of me, I'm gonna be all right.
Welcome to FootballGameplan.com, where football makes sense. I'm Emory Hunt, the Czar of the Playbook, bringing you another edition of 4 Downs with the Czar here at MetLife Stadium, where the New York Giants knocked off the Detroit Lions by the score of 17-6. Let's start with first down. Giant offensive takeaways in the first half. Quite honestly, I thought this was the best the Giants played on offense on the opening drive. It was the best opening drive, I believe, of the season. Good mix of run to pass. It ended up being an opening drive touchdown that got them out to an early 7-0 lead. Also, the offensive line played great. They were opening up the holes in the running game. Their pass protection was excellent. The downhill running game was having a lot of success against Detroit. The reason why you wanted to run downhill in this ball game, I talked about it in the preview, when you're playing in a rain or on a slick field, you want to go downhill because the defensive linemen will have issues trying to get off blocks and also trying to anchor because of their footing. If you try to run east and west, guys just have to beat you to the spot, and it's easier to stop. So if you try to cut back, you can't. The pursuit will smother you and bring you down. So running downhill would have had to have been the game plan for both teams in this game, and I thought in the first half the Giants did a great job in doing so, going downhill with their rushing attack. First half defensive takeaways for the New York Giants. I thought the run defense was solid. They did a great job in not allowing Detroit, who was banged up in the backfield, to generate these big runs going downhill or going off tackle. You saw a great team defense and everything. Pressure was good too. They just couldn't get to Matt Stafford. They were getting pushed, but Stafford was doing a great job of evading pressure and getting outside and extending the play. But the pressure was there. You saw that could have been something that they were going to work on moving into the second half. But first half, you saw an active pass rush. You saw solid run defense, and you also saw them force a fumble on this end of the field, which stopped Detroit from scoring a touchdown. That was a big play in the game. They also lost Janoris Jenkins in the first half defensively, which really threw off the secondary because it's going to push everyone out. It's going to weaken their depth and their flexibility and versatility on the back end. And we were going to see what this team was made of in the second half. So I thought that Jenkins injury was huge. The big the forced fumble here in the end zone by Zach Zenner, fumbled into the end zone. Giants recovered. That stopped the scoring drive. So it was a solid defensive performance in the first half for the New York Giants. Let's move on to second down. First half offensive takeaways for the Detroit Lions. I thought Stafford's injury was affecting him, but it wasn't detrimental. He still was able to work well with what he was able to do in the passing game. You saw him escape pressure. His athleticism was on full display. This is a guy that I think that's vastly underrated with his pocket mobility and escapability and evading pressure. He did that against the Giants all game long. They had a tough time trying to get him on the ground. So you saw his athleticism on display. Now you saw Tate and the receivers, Golden Tate and those receivers, they just couldn't get open against that Giants secondary. They will have more success in the second half with the injury. We'll talk about that in a second, but in the first half they really couldn't get open. The offensive line, I thought, did a solid job keeping that Giants defense at bay, and they were having some success running downhill, but they got away from it, and that was going to be a huge key in the second half. Now let's look at some first half defensive takeaways for the Detroit Lions. I thought the defense played exceptionally well. This secondary, in my opinion, was probably the most disciplined secondary I've seen in quite some time. They do a great job in coaching those guys up on the back end. You also look at the fact that they were getting push but not pressure. They wasn't really getting to Eli Manning, more push but not pressure. And on third down, it was 3 out of 7 on third down, but I thought the third down defense was iffy. The 3 that they gave up were big plays, and that's something they had to improve on in the second half if if they wanted to win. Let's move on to third down. Giant offensive takeaways in the second half. They picked up right where they left off in the first half. I thought they were efficient, but in the late part of the third quarter into the fourth quarter, they started to become more inconsistent. Eli Manning was missing gimme throws. Third down offense wasn't as effective like it was in the first half, but Odell Beckham Jr. stepped up once again and made the biggest play of the game to push this lead to 17-6, which ended up being the winning points for the Giants. Second half defensive takeaways. I thought the defense actually stepped up and played well in the absence of Janoris Jenkins. That was a huge blow. And once he was out the game, you saw Dominic Rodgers-Cromartie go to the outside, and Detroit was able to attack him deep down the field. He kept his eyes in the backfield on one play, was a deep ball to Tate on this end. On the second time he kept his eyes in the backfield, was a deep ball to Tate again, going down the sideline. Ultimately, though, him keeping his eyes in the backfield ended up making the play to seal the game for the Giants, intercepting the football, a pass from Matt Stafford in the end zone. So once again, I thought the Janoris Jenkins injury was hurting the Giants, but it wasn't detrimental. Everyone else stepped up and played well. Leon Hall did a great job as well, coming inside and playing more corner than safety. So once again, this defense made a lot of plays, made more plays than the Lions did to win the game. So that's why this defense, like we always talked about since training camp, if you've been following us here on Football Game Plan, this secondary really leads the defense, but you saw in the second half as well. Finally, the pass rush started to get to Stafford. Olivier Vernon got Stafford on the ground. He was in the face of Stafford throughout the entire second half. He really started to give Taylor Decker some problems on the left side, but that's why you pay Vernon money. He was able to flip him back and forth, left to right. His pass rush really affected the Lions' passing game and forced Matt Stafford off the spot consistently. Moving on to fourth down offensive takeaways in the second half for the Detroit Lions. Matt Stafford is one tough son of a gun. He gutted it out in the rain, in the cold, all game long. Took some hits, got outside the pocket, tried to extend plays. He played his butt off in this ball game. He played tough, but there were opportunities to go deep down the field and he just couldn't get it down that way. And normally a healthy Matt Stafford would have been able to take those shots deep down the field, coming off of scramble drills where he breaks contain and the receivers break off their route and get open. They were open, but he just couldn't pull the trigger. And their running game got shut down in the second half. That also limited what they were going to do on offense. They couldn't really move the football or stay on the field on third downs as well. So their offense didn't have as much success, but you never thought they were really out of the ball game until that late interception. But that's the biggest key. A healthy Stafford, I think this would have been a different game, but he played some tough football in the second half. Looking at some defensive takeaways in the second half, defensive coordinator Terrell Austin, I thought, did a great job. He called a masterful game against his Giants offense. He really was able to curtail what they were able to do in the second half. That defense of the Lions kept the Detroit Lions in the ball game in the second half. So Austin deserves some credit. Like I said before, their secondary is probably the most disciplined secondary, even without Darius Slay, whom they lost in the first half. That wasn't a big blow for their defense because their defense still was able to give Eli Manning and those receivers some problems in the end. So I think defensively the Lions came ready to play. They just couldn't do anything offensively to maximize those bonus possessions. You also look at the fact that they rose to the occasion. I talked about that before. And you also look at the run defense was still good against the New York Giants. They really tried to make this an Eli Manning versus Matt Stafford game, and they had a little bit of success doing so. They shut down the Giants' run to an extent in the second half, more so than what we saw in the first two quarters. Offensive player of the game for the New York Giants, I'm going to give it to the center, Weston Richburg. I thought he played an outstanding game from a running game standpoint. A lot of the big runs went downhill, right down at A-gap where he was walling off and pinning his guy inside, Washington's guy out to the opposite gap. He did a great job blocking all game long. Interior pass protection was excellent. Run blocking was great, and Weston Richburg was a big reason why he played a great game. Defensive player of the game, I'm going to give it to Olivier Vernon. He was a pressure cooker for the Lions offense. They flipped him to different sides. He was able to get pressure. He was able to affect the pocket, got a pass breakup as well on Matt Stafford, and really frustrated Stafford throughout the course of the ball game. Special teams player of the game, Brad Wing, the punter, kept Detroit inside their own 20-yard line, inside their own 10, down 2 punts inside the 5-yard line. So Brad Wing, once again, proving his worth on special teams. And the play of the game, quite honestly, was the game winner. It seems like we talk about this guy every week making the play of the game, and it was Odell Beckham's touchdown on this end of the field where he made a one-handed catch to get into the end zone to push the score to 17-6, which would have been more than enough for the Lions offense that hadn't had enough success consistently moving the ball down the field. 17-6 ended up being the final score, but that extra touchdown gave them enough cushion to where they really could have put that game away, and that was the biggest play made by number 13, Odell Beckham Jr. Offensive player of the game for the Detroit Lions, you have to give it to Matt Stafford. What a great game, gutsy performance he played. Despite having an injured hand, his throwing hand, he was able to make some plays in the passing game. His athleticism was on display. He didn't let that hand be a reason why his team lost. He did everything he could to lead his team to victory. I came away very impressed with not only the mental toughness, but the physical toughness of Matthew Stafford. Defensive player of the game, I like linebacker Tahir Whitehead. I thought he played excellent. The linebackers, to me, throughout the course of the game for the Lions played well. Their back seven, I thought, did a great job, but Tahir Whitehead was a very effective player, dropping back in coverage in the pass defense department, rallying up and making a tackle to stop a running back or short pass for a short gain, stopping plays in the running game. So I thought Tahir Whitehead did a great job. And when you look at kicker Matt Prater, he's their special teams player of the game. 6 points, all made by Prater. He answered the call when his number was called. So those are the players of the game for the Detroit Lions. The play of the game for Detroit, on this end of the field, you saw Marvin Jones make an outstanding catch against sticky coverage by Eli Apple. He was able to concentrate on the football, haul it in, and that got them in position to get 3 more points on the board. So Marvin Jones, I thought, not only played a great game, showing sticky hands, but made the play of the game for the Detroit Lions, catching an outstanding pass thrown by Matt Stafford. So that's a wrap here from MetLife Stadium. I'm Emory Hunt, the Czar of the Playbook. For more of our 4 Down with the Czar segments, visit our website at footballgameplan.com/4downs with the Czar.